Preface. Civilizations do not collapse because of mystery. They collapse because the systems they build eventually outgrow the competence of the people tasked with running them. Collapse occurs when complexity rises beyond the level of capability available to sustain it, whether because capability declines, complexity accelerates, or both. This book began far from the dusty libraries of historians, or the marble halls of politicians. It began in a CAD support ticket, an ordinary, modern, technical frustration. It began in a place no empire theorist would think to look, a broken software feature, and the institutional incompetence hidden behind it. The kind of failure that, at first, seems mundane. Irritating. A small glitch in the machinery of daily work. But like all patterns, once you see it clearly, it reveals a structural truth with implications much larger than the immediate irritation that exposed it. I had spent years building a career using a popular software known as CAD, computer-assisted drafting, the backbone of modern design. The fundamentals worked, they had to. Entire industries relied on them. And then one day, those fundamentals failed. A simple, core feature was broken at a level so basic it defied belief. I reached out to support, expecting clarity, accountability, and technical competence. Instead, I received incoherence, evasion, a lack of understanding of their own system. Answers that betrayed not just neglect, but a profound drop in internal capability. It wasn't the bug that shocked me. Bugs happen. What shocked me was this: the people maintaining the system no longer understood the system. At first, this angered me. Then it unsettled me. And eventually it forced me to confront a much larger truth. This failure was not unique. It was not accidental. It was not confined to software. It was a symptom of something deeper, something I had been observing across governments, corporations, utilities, institutions, media, education, logistics, engineering, and the physical world around us. A thinning of competence. A reduction in capability. A growing mismatch between the complexity of the systems we rely on and the ability of the people charged with operating, maintaining, and repairing them. Civilizations are defined by complexity, by the systems they build. The skyscrapers. The supply chains. The digital networks. The bureaucratic structures. The roads, the hospitals, the power grids, the tax codes, the military hierarchies, the financial markets. Complexity is what lifts us above subsistence. But complexity has a cost, it must be matched by capability. When complexity rises faster than capability, or when capability declines beneath rising complexity, the same outcome emerges. Complexity becomes a liability, not an asset. This is the universal truth missing from most theories of civilizational decline. Historians speak of decadence, corruption, moral rot, political dysfunction, inequality, environmental stress, or resource shortages. Economists speak of diminishing returns. Anthropologists speak of cultural fragmentation. Systems theorists speak of fragility and cascading failure. Demographers speak of falling birth rates. Sociologists speak of trust erosion. And all of these factors are real, but none of them identify the core mechanism. They orbit the truth without striking the center. That center is simple. Civilizations collapse when system complexity exceeds available capability, whether because capability falls, complexity rises, or both. Everything else is secondary. The problem is not complexity itself. Complexity is the natural progression of growth. The problem is the imbalance that forms when systems expand faster than the competence required to sustain them, or when competence erodes beneath systems already built. This gap can emerge from either side of the equation. Systems grow, populations change. Capable individuals age out. Demographic decline reduces the number of high-skill contributors. Immigration shifts from selective to mass volume, prioritizing numbers over competency match. Bureaucracies expand to compensate for thinning skill. Organizations prioritize compliance over competence. Incentives shift from excellence to protection. Standards quietly lower to keep systems functioning. And eventually, even the appearance of functionality becomes difficult to maintain. When you begin seeing the world through this lens, your frustration stops being personal. You stop blaming the operator who misclicked, the clerk who gave a wrong answer, the manager who avoided responsibility, the technician who misdiagnosed the problem, or the support agent who couldn't comprehend the issue. Their capability hasn't necessarily changed. The system around them has grown too complex. They are running a machine designed for a level of competence the civilization no longer produces in sufficient quantity. This realization dissolves anger. It redirects blame toward the structure rather than the individual. It exposes the mechanism rather than the symptom. And it explains, with brutal clarity, why so many modern institutions feel like they're decaying from the inside out. The classic theories of civilizational collapse converge on the same names: Toynbee, Tainter, Diamond, Spengler, Ibn Khaldun, Ferguson, and others. Each isolates a real pressure. Each captures an important fragment of the truth. Yet none provides a complete mechanical explanation. Something fundamental remains missing: a universal law. A simple, structural mechanism that explains all the others. A mechanism that does not depend on culture, geography, era, or ideology. A mechanism that holds for Rome, for the Ottomans, for the Mongols, for the British Empire, and for the modern West. That missing piece is capability, relative to complexity. Capability is the force multiplier of complexity. It determines whether complexity is sustainable or fatal. It determines whether institutions flourish or ossify. It determines whether bureaucracies are lean or bloated, whether standards rise or decline, whether systems adapt or stagnate. Capability is not static. It is always moving, rising or falling relative to the complexity it must support. Capability is the density of competent operators able to maintain, diagnose, and adapt complex systems. This is not a partisan diagnosis, nor an ideological argument. Every modern political faction inherits the same demographic arithmetic, the same institutional pressures, and the same capability constraints. Decline is structural, not partisan. The mechanism operates regardless of who holds office or which slogans dominate the news cycle. The aim here is clarity, not advocacy. I wrote this book for people who sense that something is fundamentally wrong but cannot quite articulate the mechanism. I wrote it for people who feel daily frustration interacting with systems that once worked smoothly. I wrote it for those who look at the world and intuitively know that the decline is structural, not incidental. And I wrote it for those who want to direct their energy toward understanding rather than rage. Once you understand the capability, complexity cycle, the world begins to make sense. Institutional decay makes sense. Bureaucratic expansion makes sense. Falling birth rates make sense. Immigration patterns make sense. Declining infrastructure quality makes sense. Political instability makes sense. The constant feeling of things don't work like they used to makes sense. You are no longer lost in noise. You can see the signal. This is not a book about doom. It is a book about clarity. Collapse, in this model, is not annihilation. It is recalibration. A civilization returns to the level of complexity it can support with the capability it currently possesses. It contracts to a sustainable equilibrium. This is a painful process, but not a mysterious one. If you finish this book and feel that a hidden pattern has been revealed, one you always felt but could never articulate, then the work has succeeded. This is my attempt to capture, in one coherent structure, the mechanism behind civilizational rise, stagnation, decline, and collapse. The missing foundation. The universal law that explains our modern moment, and places it within the long arc of history. Let us begin.